Diversity is a gift to be celebrated in the church,
but not if it compromises one's doctrinal beliefs.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingartner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz. We're so happy that you've joined us, and we're going to have another engaging discussion with our panelists, but we always begin by having our panelists introduce themselves to you, and here they are.
My name is Bishop Michael OLSON, and I serve as the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Canon John Peterson, and I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, District of Columbia.
And I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
Our subject today is about some incidents and things that are going on in the Southern Baptist Church. Over the last several months, the largest Protestant church in the United States, the Southern Baptist Convention, has been divided over three important and critical social issues in the United States. First, at the end of 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, two prominent black megachurch pastors broke away from the convention over the issue of race, and in particular, the critical race theory. One of the major concerns is the lack of racial diversity in the Southern Baptist Convention, including recently appointed entity heads, all of whom are white men. Second, on February 23rd, Townview Baptist Church in Kennesaw, Georgia, was ousted from the Southern Baptist Convention because that church had accepted a gay couple and their three adopted sons into its congregation. On the Townview Baptist Church website, their vision statement in part reads, quote, "In creating community of hope, we will welcome all God's people, believing that diversity is a gift to be celebrated," close quote. Thirdly, several prominent Southern Baptist Convention conservatives are upset that women are holding titles such as children's pastor or teaching pastor. The conservative members cite church doctrine that bars women from being pastors. In 2000, a statement of faith asserted, quote, "While both men and women are gifted for service in the church, the office of pastor is limited to men as qualified by Scripture," close quote. These three issues are having to be dealt with today in most, if not all, Christian denominations. Hence, this is an important topic for our panel to discuss today. Here are our questions. Number one, how is your denomination dealing with the three issues dividing the Southern Baptist Convention today? Two, when discussing these issues, are we really dealing with biblical issues or social contextual issues that are proof texting to fill our respective religious political perspectives? Or three, what happens when any church becomes a mouthpiece for a political party when considering these social issues? Really important discussion, really looking forward to this when we begin with John.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say, and I want to say, that I never take any delight in reflecting on any divisions in any church, be it the Southern Baptist Convention or divisions within my own church, the Episcopal Church, or in our global communion. In the mid-1990s, and for the next 15 years, we have certainly known divisions within the Episcopal Church in the United States, centering around homosexuality, blessing of gay marriages, and the ordination of a gay priest or gay priests to be ordained bishops. Earlier, of course, in the 1980s and early as the 70s, the hot topic was the ordination of women to the priesthood and to the episcopacy. Today, those hot-button issues in the 70s, 80s, and 90s have now become normative in our church and part of our doctrine. Although I do confess that not all the churches within the Anglican Communion agree with the decisions that have been made by the Episcopal Church. I would want to argue that church doctrine is no more than the written body of teachings of a religious group and generally is accepted by that group. If an individual or a parish has a different perspective than what the religious doctrine is of that particular church, then that individual or the parish has absolutely full right to be able to leave that religious group. That is certainly what happened with the Town View Baptist Church in Georgia. That parish, moving into that parish, I'd say more technically accurate, moving into that parish was a gay couple who had adopted 3 children, and they wanted to be able, that parish wanted to be able to welcome them as all of God's people, believing that diversity is a gift to be celebrated. The majority of the Town View Baptist Church in Georgia, 70% of them, agreed, and hence the church faced banishment from the Southern Baptist Convention for accepting an LGBTQ same-sex related couple. The doctrinal position that the Southern Baptist Convention is staunchly against same-sex relationships. It also has to be mentioned, in all fairness, that 30% of the membership of the Town View Baptist Church agreed with the position of the Southern Baptist Convention, and hence left the Town View Baptist Church. The church welcomed the family of 5, even if the parents were in a same-sex relationship. The Southern Baptist Convention doctrine that the church cannot tolerate same-sex relationships meant that the Town View Baptist Church in Georgia left the Southern Baptist Convention.
Thank
Over
you,
to
John.
you, Tony.
Thank you, Canon John, my friend, my good friend, and it's just good being here. And I think you stated the answer. If a couple, or if a couple is a same-sex, they're in a same-sex relationship in a marriage, and they're in a church where the church is a part of a convention that has a set of doctrines, and the doctrines clearly states that this is a lifestyle that we don't accept and adopt. I think it's the correct thing to do to move on rather than to stay there and try to change the doctrine. And I think it's fair to for everyone to define what is meant by diversity. That could be a loaded word because diversity can mean one thing to someone and another thing to someone else. So I think churches have the right to hold to their doctrine, their doctrinal beliefs, and I'm always very sensitive when we put race and same-sex marriage in the same, box. I think we have to deal with these separately. The issue with the same-sex couples, and again, I've always have told people, I'm a firm believer that you treat people with dignity and respect. You love people no matter who they are. Everyone is made in the image of God. In addition, if there's a church that's a part of a convention and they have a set of doctrines and it's in opposition to what you believe, move on and go to another place. In terms of race and the CRTI dilemma, I think we have to treat that separately. That's a different issue. Racism is certainly wrong. Discrimination is wrong as well. But we know, there are still people who believe that people's ethnicity, you didn't have a choice being born white, black, Asian. There are people who still believe that. And others believe that there is a choice in certain same-sex relationships. And that's just the world in which we live. So the whole race issue and racism, churches have to deal with that. The Southern Baptist Convention has, I believe, between 42,000, 46,000 churches, somewhere between there. And if you have a couple of hundred races in there, that's less than 1%, you know. Pray for those folks and move on. Senior pastors, the whole senior pastor issue is a matter of interpretation as well. And, you know, there are many churches outside of, in addition to Baptist churches, that believe that the office of the senior pastor is for males. And I respect that. And I love out in the marketplace, there's a lot of ideas out there, and it's a great conversation to have. But at the end of the day, no matter who we are, we treat people with dignity and respect. And I think we need to treat churches with dignity and respect too, and honor the doctrine that they have.
Thanks, Tony. Michael?
Oh, sure. Boy, this is a very, it's a broad topic, and it's an important topic, and it's almost more, as Tony, you pointed out, I'd call it a bundled topic. Mm-hmm. I mean, even the letters LGBTQ, Q most recently added. Well, exactly, and I mean, and hence, you know, I'll continue before we add more letters by the end of the show. And I noticed I'd like to buy a vowel, but if I would, I think that the distinction that you point towards, in a sense, is what we have here. A couple things is law and culture form each other. There's a reciprocal relationship of that. But law and culture in that reciprocal relationship affect human actions and how we understand human actions and their morality of it. And so I think speaking from a Catholic point of view, the concerns we have pastorally are really the extension of the current situation that's occurred with the redefinition of marriage legally to include the vowed life between two men or two women, is really kind of the extension of the same problems that we've tried to address pastorally and theologically, with an ongoing redefinition of marriage, which began with divorce as a regular response to problems of permanence and fidelity, which are essential qualities of marriage, as is also the issue of contraception, is a regular use of artificial contraception, that is, for the other good of marriage, which is procreation of children. And so there's been a gradual cultural shift about what's acceptable to the point where what 40 years ago would have just been seen as something that's true, but acts that were aberrant, you know, as far as sexual acts between two men and two women, you know, are now no different, in a sense, with different goods than a marriage between a man and a woman, especially as civilly recognized. Okay, with children really in the picture only as the result of a choice. That can be used by technology or of a value that completes and validates the couple's relationship, the interior dimensions of their relationship. With that, I think in time now has come the point where our culture has flipped things upside down in the sense that sex now becomes a public issue and marriage is a private issue. It's a private lifestyle choice that two people want to make for whatever reasons they want to make it. And that puts pressure on people with homosexual inclinations who don't want to engage in homosexual actions and who understand what is the traditional virtue of chastity. which really underscores and prepares one for the virtue of fidelity in marriage. Now that's the issue of homosexuality, which part of the arguments by gay activists over the year was also that one is born with this disposition and then should have, by virtue of birth, have the right to exercise these actions, all right? And not only permit them, but now promote them and approve of them through marriage. Then we bring in the issue of transgender, which is a controversial issue within the people who represent this agenda of these letters, because it does things like turn the issue of feminism up on its head with women's sports, for example, but also other things where gender now has become so fluid that if a psychological dimension, the real psychological suffering of gender dysmorphia is now just, in a sense, going to be treated univocally by mutilation, all right, or either surgically or through hormonal treatments, with children as young as 7 years of age, and so this is a very confusing thing, and I don't think those letters really adequately address an entire group of people. With regard to the issue of race, race doesn't involve it does not involve actions. Race is a quality of nature, which with one is born, and it is, in racism, is the division of an entire segment of people without any consideration of moral activity or whatsoever, because it's not relevant in that sense. Finally, and I'd be very as quick as possible, is this: no one deserves disrespect. Every person is created in the image and likeness of God, and God calls each and every one of us to live the gift of our sexuality, considerate of its design, but most especially of how we treat and respect other people through its use for those 3 points of fidelity, permanence, and openness to God's gift of children.
Thank you, Michael. Tom?
I think that part of our problem here has been to separate objectivism from subjectivism, and the affirmation that one's sexual orientation is a subjective thing. It is, in my belief, the way one is created. And that is a gift of God. That is a part of the reflection of the imago Dei within the person. When our doctrines stand in the way of us recognizing that, we have to question not only the doctrines themselves, but the whole notion of creedalism, doctrinalism, the having of doctrines, the enforcement of doctrines. Doctrines are good and important to help us organize our thinking, to teach, to help us identify problems from the past. But doctrines too often tend to define God, tend to put God in a box, and there's not one person on this panel that would agree that God can be put in a box. In our tradition, there is no creed but Christ. We welcome all. We've ordained women since the 1880s. We ordain gay folk, even sometimes not knowing it. we are very divided on how that gets done, but it is being done, and it's being celebrated within the larger part of our church.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to go to a break, and we'll be right back.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. This has been a profound discussion, and we didn't really discuss it. We've just made statements. So we're running into a time limitation. We'd love to spend more time with this subject, and we may have to do another program to flesh out some of these issues. But let's go to our summations now. We begin again with Michael.
I think that these issues have will always take us beyond even the disagreement of law and culture in that relationship, but also call us to a deeper reflection on how we understand and care for and treat the human person. And not just the human person as an abstract idea, but really this human person who has a name, who has a family, who is in relationship with. And to understand morality has to be considered in not an abstract theoretical form, but also in the practical order that is sustained both by theology and also real science.
Thank you, Michael. Tom?
We're always learning. God is always speaking. Therefore, we are always in transition. The key always is to find the loving thing. Anyone who does not love does not know God. That's not Plumbley. That's 1 John chapter 4. For God is love.
Thank you, Tom. Tony?
Yes, I think this is a great conversation. We probably should do another show on it, an additional show. I can't find anywhere in Scripture that I try to live by. I fall short so many times and so often. And so I don't think not one of us is perfect, so I make mistakes like everyone else. In addition, I can't find anywhere in Scripture where my blackness is a sin or my blackness is described as falling short of God's idea. Unfortunately, I do see where certain lifestyles are, and that's where the tension is. I don't have tension with it. I understand that other people perhaps will have some tension with what the Scripture clearly states about lifestyles. And that's where individuals who fall into that category will have to explain, well, what do these passages mean? What are the applications of those? And to be balanced, if a church is going to be disfellowshipped for having same-sex couples in there, we need to look at racism in those churches as well and ask ourselves the question, we need to make sure we don't have a double standard where we are disfellowshipping churches for one area and yet tolerating another area that is clearly sin.
Thank you, Tony. John?
One of the things we'll have in this next discussion is your last two words, what is really sin?
Right.
I think that is, I think that all too often we are able to say, oh, this is sinful and this is not sinful. And I think that part of the problem that the church faces today is that we come to too quick a judgment in relationship to what is sin and what is not sin. I'm going to actually agree with my bishop friend on this panel. I do think that there's a problem in grouping together letters like LGBTQ plus whatever and whatever the next new vowel is going to be. I think that that is a real issue. But I don't think that that lets us off the hook for not really trying to come to have an understanding of what that means. I have a friend whose son has just recently been able to identify himself as trans. And doing that and coping with that and trying to understand that is a brand new experience for that family and for the friends. And to be able to lump them into saying, oh, that is sin, or that is some genital mutilation, I think that we have to be very careful on how we use these words and how we actually, what type of empathy does the church have in a situation like that? And so I think that we do need to have this discussion. And I think that one of the real issues here is how do we understand the law? And what is the biblical understanding of law? If we need another program, we need it on that, because certainly the scripture gives us a whole new refreshment when we don't simply take our structures of law, but we can deal with them from a biblical perspective.
Beautiful. Thank you, John. And I'm making notes here because we do need these programs, and we're looking forward to having them. We have some follow-up programs to do. And again, as we say at the break each time, if you have programs that you'd like to have our panelists discuss, you don't have the privilege that I have of actually getting to know these gentlemen on a personal basis, and it is a beautiful thing to know these gentlemen. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.